What's going on, everybody? I hope you can hear me. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can hear me. I still got an editor making a really cool one for the intro. But guys, what's up? I'm so happy to be here this morning. So happy. Well, I guess it's about noon where I am at today. But we got a good show packed for everyone today. We got a lot of information. We got the markets pumping. And I tell you what, man, I don't know how long this is going to last. But I'll tell you one thing, we definitely deserve it. We deserve a nice little pump every once in a while. But today, we're going to go through what's happening in the markets, and then we're going to go through a little history lesson as well. So we're going to talk about what's going on in Iran with the, conflict over there, why markets are pumping. They're pricing in a quick resolution of all of this, the Strait of Hormuz being open. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to take a deep dive into Bitcoin, Tau. So any altcoins that y'all want to look at for this first hour, make sure you drop them in the comments. Before we get started, please make sure you retweet the space if you're over on X and drop some comments. And if you're on YouTube, put the good old likey like button up. But for the second half of the show, we've got a gentleman that is very big in the BSV community. And a lot of people might have no idea what BSV is, even though it's sitting at over a 300 million market cap. And it's because a lot of people came into crypto a little later. And I'll be honest, I myself am not 100% knowledgeable on BSV, but he's going to walk us through the history of Bitcoin and some of its forks. And then what are some of the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that are around BSV that may not have much merit? When I was at ETH Denver, I met some very great people. Ty, a young lady named Kate that I was able to meet over there. And so, yeah, I'm very excited about that. The community has been good. I grabbed my first bag of BSV, which is extremely hard to do, actually, which I want to talk to him about as well. And so we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it, guys. But just look at the markets. This is Tau right here. Looks like it's wanting to break out potentially. But come over to Bitcoin, trading like a you-know-what coin. This thing's trading like a meme. Look at this. Boom. That's what I mean. I told y'all yesterday I'd been trading this whole area, guys, and that's a good segue to shout out to our stream sponsor. This wouldn't be possible without Blofin. If you want to join Blofin down below, if you are looking for an exchange. Kurt, looking forward to this. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah. Crypto wifey, what's up, babe? Okay. Woo! What's going on, guys? I had someone yesterday when I was leaving the stream. You just ignore cubic, and I was like, I wish I was still on the stream so I could respond. One, I've reviewed it before on stream. Two, I'm actually DMing the team about getting them up here. Anybody that that's building cool stuff, I want to talk to them. I want them to come up here. I want to see what they're working with. Open invite. Okay, this doesn't go to just all random memes because I do a lot of due diligence when it comes to those. But it comes to, people that are building real applications right now and real things that will progress cryptocurrency. But like I said, guys, make sure you retweet the space, and I appreciate it. So let's get into the markets today. The markets are pumping all the way across. We're going to go over the Qs. I currently still have a hedge bet on the Qs via SQQ right here that we'll get into in a minute. But I would offer some caution in these markets. I would offer some caution in these markets. I would not go full-fledged. We're 100% back. But while we're back, let's enjoy it. Let's enjoy it. So you can see right here, this is data that was just published this morning by Bloomberg, Walter Bloomberg. And you can see this is the cost of shipping oil. So not the actual price of oil, but the cost to ship it. It cost over 29 million to ship crude from the U.S. Gulf to China. That's $14.50 a barrel. So adding that on top of the price per barrel of currently, I think 76, 78, it gets expensive. That leads to inflation. That leads to a higher CPI. Golly, what did my wife put in here? She's trying to get rid of me or what? No, I'm just joking. But that leads to higher CPI. In return, possibly leads to no cuts on interest rates. But we will get into that a little bit more in a little bit. But if we come over here and look at this visual, this shows, and we went over yesterday. Let me turn that down. That's kind of annoying. If you take a look at this, this is showing the straight, and you can see how much less traffic there is now, 90% traffic down. Because as we detailed yesterday in stream, that right now 90% of it's down, but about 22% of global oil goes through there. Most of the oil goes overseas. But why it matters to us, like I said, whether you fill up a car, whether you don't, is because of the fact that oil goes into the price of everything. Shipping, all of that goes into absolutely everything. And yesterday afternoon, the president came out and said something. I'm not exactly sure how he's able to do it, but affected immediately, I have ordered the United States Development Financial Corporation. And I'll be honest, I had no idea this even existed. If this is a financial entity, we have way too much fluff in the government. Like no wonder we pay so much taxes and it still feels like we've got absolutely nothing to show for it. But effective immediately, I have ordered the DFC to provide at a very reasonable price political risk insurance and guarantees for the financial security of all basically vessels. Okay. If necessary, the U.S. Navy will begin escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. So like I said, Iran doesn't necessarily have to close it for it to make a very big deal for markets. But there was also talk this morning that a potential ceasefire was being discussed. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me for that. One, who the heck are they even talking to? There's been so many of the top people taken out. And number two is, I mean, if they want regime change, not saying I agree with it, but if they want regime change, why would they stop now? And so the market is definitely, in my opinion, especially if we come over here to the Qs, which, guys, if you don't know what the Qs is the NASDAQ, okay, essentially. And I've been saying there's a few ways to look at this. I think it's a rolling top. That's how I'm kind of playing it. But I'm very long a lot of things. So taking a short on something or buying something that is a short is more of a hedge than an all-out, bet per se. But if we take a look, like I showed yesterday, and we'll continue to update it, because whether you're in stocks or not, you need to pay attention to this, because if stocks roll over, pretty much everything's going to roll over, But there is this trend line that we detailed that's going back until last year. I think it's this one. Yeah. Okay. And you can see, let's change that to a prettier color. That pops out a little bit. And you can see we're trying to break back through it, but we're still underneath the 100-day moving average. You can see it got rejected from it right here. Got rejected from it right here. And we're coming up to it again. So what I'm afraid is going to happen is we could potentially trap a lot of people into like a bull trap kind of thing. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to see how it all plays out. The market is definitely pricing in an early resolve of this conflict. But let's stick more to I know we've gotten into a lot of the political side of things recently, just because it has a lot to do with our bags, right? When there's political tension, when there's global tension. But the number one thing we have to be looking at, oil prices, because that affects CPI and inflation. And number two, I would look at long-term treasuries. They're actually going up now. So no matter what the market's doing, long-term treasuries going up is not a good sign. I'll just say that. But for now, we're going to enjoy it, okay? Nobody wants to be Debbie Downer at the party. You know what I mean? I'm fun to party with, whether you believe it or not. At least I used to be fun to party with, okay? I don't party anymore. I'm a dad. I drink like, if sometimes I have 2 cervezas, I'm like, I'm done for the night. I'm a guy that's in bed by like 9:30, I'm old soul. But yeah, let's break down the market. So basically, if we come over here and take a look at BTC, and this is over on Blofin, like I said, our stream sponsor, and people are like, oh my gosh, how are we pumping? Dude, because we're down, 40% the last month. But we have had a pretty clear breakout, not just from this downward trend line, but also from the high that we achieved, post the drop to 60K. And so let's see if we can hold above that. Ideally, what I would like to see if we are going to hold above this is, obviously the market pumps a lot, like that 10% today. So that's big. But if we could stay above this line, or even at least the body of those candles, like right here, if we could stay above the 71, 72 range, definitely not get back below 70, then it could be bullish, and then look for some trade setups and stuff like that. If we do something like that, I'm basically just going to be reviewing a whole bunch of projects over the next, let's say, 30 minutes before we have Mr. Kurt up. So if there's anything y'all want us to dive into, let me know. Let's come over here and look at daddy of altcoins. It's been a minute since we've looked at this. So this is the line that I had originally had drawn, but you could see that's pretty old. So if we look here, and this is interesting to look at, Bitcoin is outpacing everything in the market. And I'll tell you why I say that in a second. So when we were just looking at Bittensor Tau a second ago, I was looking to see if it was going to break out. The same with Ethereum. Is it going to break out of these highs that it reached after the drop to 60K? Because golly jolly. Sorry about that, guys. If you want to pray for me, just retweet the space. It counts as a prayer for me. So if we, and I don't mean to be making any jokes about that. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I don't like to make jokes about that. But anyways, let's get into this. So we still don't look like we've broken out of any altcoin charts. However, Bitcoin has been able to break out of the altcoin charts. Now let's look at it from a different view, from a different lens. BTC had pumped 20% from the low to the level that it broke out of just now. If we come over here to ETH and we look, it jumped 23%. So it's almost like now we have the same amount of pump. Bitcoin's leading and altcoins are leading pretty equally. But initially, Ethereum had a little stronger of a wave. So maybe that's why it hasn't broke out. But just from a chart structural standpoint, it still looks like it's at a resistance level for now. So that's something to keep an eye on if you're heavily into altcoins. Let's look at some, let's see what else they got here. Yeah, and just showing what I was meaning by Tau right here. Just kind of in this level. This one actually looks a little weaker comparative just because it's not up to the even line after the big drop. But, this thing ran a lot on its own recently. Before Bitcoin was pumping, it was pumping. It was getting over $200, trying to get over 210. And so Tau's one that I really, really like. PT, what's up, brother? Man, I like, where'd the new PFP come from? You've been changing PFPs on me a lot, I feel like. He's been a supporter of me from day one. Very good guy. But we got some good guests lined up this week. We're going to have Miss Crypto Empress on Friday, I believe, to end the week. And then tomorrow, I'm trying to have Kyle from 6 Figs Up. Had somebody asking about the internet computer. Actually looks pretty good. ICP is one that I wouldn't count out. There's a lot of FUD around it, which is why I want to have Kyle up tomorrow. There's a lot of FUD around the initial chart showing that it hit $400, whatever. It was kind of fugazi, but it was a lot of manipulation by FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. So we're going to get into that tomorrow. But yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's see. Altcoin request. At what price do you see Caspa? Yeah, man. I try to avoid raw price predictions anymore. But what I can do is show some technical analysis targets. And so, because that's just not what I think, that's just like TA type based targets. So, yeah, if we come over and let's look at CAS, and they have it over here on Blofin as well. And if the cubic comes in here and asks, I'll look at that too. So CAS kind of looks like the same. If you want to get picky, CAS does look like it kind of broke out of here, but then again, it also looked like it kind of broke out of there too, But the low that we hit for CAS was 2.5 cents, and my technical analysis target was 2.3 in terms of an 886 fib level retracement. But if we go to the highs from there, it was about 3.5 cents. So we're still about 10% away from that on CAS. So yeah, let's get into CAS, like long term. So this chart goes back only to when it listed, but that's perfectly fine. So from a fib level, if let's just say the low's in, okay, let's just hypothetically say the low's in. These numbers wouldn't change much even if it dropped down to 2 cents or something. You could see like a full fib extension would take it up to 78 cents. Okay, that's a full fib extension. Obviously this level right here is going to be heavy resistance, the 20 cent range, because if you think about it, sure, a lot of people bought there, but a lot of people also haven't bought yet or are going to buy whenever it starts pumping a little bit, if it starts pumping a little bit. And so, you're looking at somebody that's up 5 or 6x. So there's going to be a lot of selling pressure. Best case scenario is you see the chart do something like this, inform a cup and handle. And then from there, the target of a cup and handle is from the bottom of the cup to the top of the cup. And then you take that to the breakout point, which takes us very close to the extension of the full fib extension, which CAS actually did a full fib extension the first go around. If you look at the first run up to like a few cents and then dropping down, if you took that measurement, it took us to 20 cents. And so then the 618 over is 31 cents, right? So I'll just kind of mark out the fib levels for us, and we can keep these on the chart because I like to remove the fib just because it kind of makes the chart look a little wonky. But yeah, this is assuming the low's in, and I'll show you a little bit. If the low's not in, and let's say the low is at 2 cents, for instance, you see these targets actually extend a little bit. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about technical analysis, is that the deeper the retracement, it's actually more bullish if it's an asset that's going to survive, right? So the deeper the pullback, the tighter the spring gets, that kind of thing. But yeah, let's go ahead and remove the fib now. And so you can kind of see the fib targets. Now, what could make Caspa outperform fib targets if we did get any kind of altcoin season? And in my opinion, it's simple. It's very, very simple. It's demand. Right now, there is not a ton of demand for the Caspa token. Okay. There's not a lot of use cases for the Caspa token. I've offered to have some of the developers that are currently building on Caspa to come up. There's Chat. There's like a poker, like an on-chain poker thing. There's some cool stuff that people are building right now. But until VProgs come up and stuff like that, that's when we get the real demand. And the biggest thing I can compare it to is something like Solana. Solana, if we look at this all time, it spent what, 2020, a year and a half down here, right? And then when they started having ecosystem built and stuff, and people had to buy Solana to swap in the asset XYZ or whatever, then it came about, right? And then you had the FTX debacle happen, right? And this dropped, it was like 95% that it dropped, which brought it down to $8. And then from $8, it went to, a 29x, and this is a 52 billion market cap asset at the time. If we look at what it was back then, it was 140 billion asset at the time. But that was all based on demand and use case for the asset. Like, a lot of people don't like meme coins. Personally, I like meme coins. I think they're fun. It's not something I full port a portfolio in, or I have any kind of expectations for them. It's a trading thing. It's a fun thing. It's no different than I'm going on a cruise next week. I'm going to take a few $100. I'm going to go play blackjack. I assume I'm going to lose it. It's not something I'm like, oh man, what is this meme coin going to blah, 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 do, right? And there's a couple of them, like Pingu, I think is legit, things like that. But there's no denying that meme coins bring a lot of demand. Like, the reason Solana hit almost $300 is from demand from the Trump coin and Melania coin. People that have never been in the Solana ecosystem got in the Solana ecosystem, and that's what caused the huge run up, just in, like, where was November? Like, look, 61% in the matter of like 2 or 3 weeks. That's crazy. But it was because people needed to buy Solana to do whatever they needed to do, right? Whatever asset they wanted to swap into. And so I do like the 31 cent area, however, probably not this year. Yeah, like, it's definitely a fib target. That's the 1.618 fib level. And so it's definitely a target to keep your eye on. But the more I know I've said this before, but the more you get into technical analysis, you're thinking it's some kind of magic. You're gonna think it's magic. Buying Cas now might just be a good investment. Real talk, legend. Cas is early. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that people get into, right? Where a lot of people are all into crypto. We live and breathe this, wake up in the middle of the night, check the charts, wake up, check the charts, watch YouTube videos, make YouTube videos, all that stuff about these assets. But what we don't understand is that they're so young. If you're really looking from a macro perspective on something like Caspa, and let's come back over to CoinMarketCap because it has the full chart. If we're really looking at this from a macro perspective, like, it's just on its wave 1, 2. Like, it's just getting started. Now, obviously, you can zoom it in, and there's waves at every time frame and things like that. But when you're looking at crypto as a whole, and you go back to the original Satoshi white paper that I'm going to get into with Kurt in a little bit, if you get into all that and you start looking at it, then you're going to realize that we're so young. Go to the S&P 500. Look at companies like Palantir that came in the early 2000s after like 9/11, and they're just now running up. You look at things like NVIDIA, and we can go look at that. But remember, guys, very important to remember that whatever I say, I'm just a random guy on YouTube, and it is never financial advice. So don't listen to me. You wouldn't want to listen to a guy on YouTube anyways, would you? Or a guy on X, wherever. But seriously, like, let's come over here, get off the cues for a little bit, and look at NVIDIA. Let's go to the monthly chart. People, this went from a company in 2000, okay, that didn't even hit $1 until it didn't even hit it there. It didn't even hit $1 until, what is that? 90, that's a long time. 99 to 2016. So for 17 years, they were building something that nobody believed in or nobody had a use case for, right? And then you fast forward to today, it's the only thing keeping the market up. Like everyone's all eyes on NVIDIA's earnings, right? And so when you look at it in this type of lens, and when you look at the adoption coming forward with cryptocurrency, you just really have to look at it through the eyes that we're in Silicon Valley, essentially. These are tech startups, and we're incredibly early. You know, the same way that the people at NVIDIA knew that this had potential back here, they knew it had potential at 62 cents when it got sold off to 6 cents, a 90% decline. Imagine being the guy that bought here and he made a 15x thinking he was a genius. And then when he seen it drop 90%, he really thought he was a genius. And now he clocked into work this morning when he could have been a multi-billionaire, you know? And so obviously I'm not saying that's going to happen for any specific asset or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that we are incredibly early to an industry. While we're sitting here on NVIDIA, it's a very good thing to look at. Right here, $4.45 trillion market cap for NVIDIA. We come over here to cryptocurrency. It's a $2.5 trillion market cap. So roughly, you could say that NVIDIA is twice the total size of cryptocurrency. And if you take a look at Bitcoin, it's 3 or 4 times the total size of BTC. So yeah, we're just incredibly early. That's why it's so volatile. People see the people that put in $1,000 and they take out 10 million. Everyone strives for that. Truth of the matter is, they don't show the people that put in 5,000 and left with 0, you know, and that's the vast majority of people. But curious, this is the hedge. This is basically the NASDAQ short. And you can see it's right back to this trend line. And a lot of people are thinking oil prices are not going to go up. I tend to think they're going to go up. If we look at oil prices now, let's see what we can see. What are people saying about oil? Russia President Putin says oil and gas prices are rising. Well, duh. What this means at the pump: gasoline prices follow crude oil with a short lag. Brent jumped $80 as tensions with Iran escalated, and moves like this typically show up at the gas station within a few days. So you can see oil still at 81 bucks, which is up from, you know, this is crude oil, but it's up from 74, 75. And this was a long-term trend line. I've looked at this chart and it broke out of it, you know, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be resolved as quickly as some people think it may be. So I posted a couple things recently. Yeah, like here's another thing. Like, you know, the reason oil's down today, or not down, but, you know, not skyrocketing, in my opinion, is because of what the president came out saying about the insured and things like that. But what I showed you earlier is that there's still limited flow of oil going through the Strait of Hormuz or any cargo ships. And you can see right now that there's also a lot of things here that, even though the president's trying to mitigate it, and I think the Venezuela conflict had a lot to do with that. You know, they got control of oil. And I honestly think that the Iran conflict is heavily to do with oil in terms of weakening China. But if we take a look, Middle Eastern oil producers are running out of storage. So, you know, they have these big storage tanks. I used to work in a manufacturing facility. You make the product, whatever it is, chemicals, soda water, whatever, and you put it in these storage tanks, right? And then from there, it can go to shipment and packaging. But if it doesn't get shipped out, well, then what happens? It backs up, it fills up. And whenever it fills up, you have to halt production. You have nowhere to put it. And so Iraq has already cut production. Saudi Arabia and UAE may follow within weeks. Oil futures hit 19-month high above $85 a barrel. Reports of Iranian peace overtures pairs gained to 82. Combined Gulf storage has 100 million barrels left, but effective capacity is lower due to operational limits and tanks. And so you can see right here that the halt could exhaust oil and fuel storage within a short amount of time. Then there was those peace talks that they said there was peace talks, and then Iranian leadership, whoever's left, said they deny it, reaching out to the CIA. And so then you have things escalating like this, something going towards Turkey, which is a NATO member. So does Article 5 get brought in? But then here's something we have for crypto that's pretty bullish. We know that there's been a big conflict around the big banks. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon was out on CNBC or whatever talking about it. How, well, if they want to offer yield, they need to be regulated like a bank. But what he's not saying is that stable coins and banks are two totally different things. For one, stable coins are backed 1-to-1 by U.S. Treasuries. On the flip side, banks are not. Banks have what's called fractionalized lending. So if you give them $100, they're going to keep 10 of it and they're going to lend 90 to me. And that's how the fractionalized banking system works. So that had been a big thing. And there was a lot of rumors that the president had been siding with the big banks, even though we know that he came out saying we were going to be the crypto capital of the world, all this. Well, then yesterday, this True Social post was made. The Genius Act is being threatened and undermined by banks. That is unacceptable. We're not going to allow it. The U.S. needs market structure done ASAP. Americans should earn more money on their money. It sounds like he got that quote from Brian Armstrong. That's exactly what Brian Armstrong says. The banks are hitting record profits, and we are not going to allow them to undermine our powerful crypto agenda. And listen to this. Listen to this. That will end up going to China. That's what I'm saying. All of this, I think, is related to China, in my personal opinion. All the conflict, all the crypto stuff, all of it is about how to, really limit China and make them hurt. The Clarity Act taking care of. The Genius Act was the USA's first big step, which that was passed last year. And getting the Clarity Act done is the next step to finish the job. And most importantly, keep this big, beautiful, powerful industry and buy Trump coin. No, I'm just joking. He doesn't say that. But yeah, Trump coin was a big old grift for our industry. Look at these pages. Like, this is the dude with like the highest IQ in the world, but he's such a LARP. Like, Eric Trump predicts BTC will reach 120 to 150K next month. Trump's like, I never said that. Even though he probably did. But Iran says they have complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump says the Navy will escort takers as soon as possible. Yeah, let's see. So, guys, in a few minutes, we're going to have Kurt up from the BSV community, and I really recommend everyone listening to the history lesson of what this is, what BSV is and everything. It's very interesting. And I'm a student of the game too. I'm ready to learn. Let's look at this. A few days ago, I said, Bitcoin, if there was ever a time you could prove you're a real store of value, now's the time. There was something, I want to go to the crypto banter one because they showed something about oil earlier.
A lot of people.
And I want to play this. This guy's pretty good at TA. And so he's kind of saying that oil's heading to 100. If oil heads to 100, we're going to see assets hurt, in my personal opinion. And so let's take a listen to this. Y'all should be able to hear it. I got that resolved from yesterday, buddy, but thank you for letting me know.
People obviously were getting fearful yesterday as this candle came down, but look at that bullish demand respecting as well, right? This is what I spoke about, the white line. You need to go into, for example, the daily time frame, and you'll see, or even higher time frame. Let's go into the weekly. The white line over here in the middle is vitally important because that is your high time frame mid-range level. So when we zoom into that on like the 4 hourly over here and we get a little bit closer to the price action, you can see that is now a successful retest of the mid-range, holding it as support, which means probable continuation higher. Next level is going to be 100, and you could probably even extend that to the range quarterly just a little bit smidge higher is 104.47. But I'll probably take a bit of profit off at 100 just because it's the round psychological number. A lot of people obviously were getting fearful.
Yeah, so oil going to 100, that would drop, markets, increase inflation, less chance of a rate drop. But I want to transition. I want to show you guys a video, a clip, and I don't know if y'all were here for the live that I talked about this, but let me find it. I should have already had it pulled up. Somebody slapped me for being sloppy. But it's basically how I got in touch with Kurt and people from the BSV community. And so let me go through this real quick, and we're going to transition to having our guest up. So we can see this post. Bitcoin's catastrophic problem no one is talking about. Bitcoin produces 144 blocks per day. Fees are paid per block. So 144 blocks, that's a block every 10 minutes for BTC. Okay. Yesterday's BTC total fees were 2.6 BTC for the entire day, which is approximately $180,000. Okay. That works out to 0.018 Bitcoin per block. Now, stick with me. This is what it matters, is because that means that if currently we are about, let's say, 70K of Bitcoin, 3.125 Bitcoin per block, that miners are getting paid $210,000, $220,000 for securing that block. That happens every 10 minutes. Well, there's 144 of those a day, right? So that's $210,000 every 10 minutes. And the total fees for the day before were barely enough to pay for that block. If you're being generous, 180K, which really isn't even enough to pay for that block. And so the problem is what happens when there's no more Bitcoin subsidy? We're capped off at 100 or at 21 million BTC. Now, this doesn't happen till year 2140. And so a lot of people think it might be a problem for the grandkids, which I don't think so good, or maybe later than my grandkids. And I don't think that's a good way to look at it, because with the halving in 3 more years from now, the Bitcoin subsidy, and mind you, subsidy, if you think of government subsidies, it's like something to get you by. If you need subsidies for this, okay, we'll get you by until you're able to be profitable. And so the subsidy is going to drop from 3.125 divided by 2. So what is that? About 1.6, 1 point, something like that. And then 4 years after that, it's going to drop in half again to like 0.75 BTC, which tells you that unless the price of Bitcoin continues to theoretically double, that there could be a problem of keeping miners online. Now, it gets a lot more complicated than that. There is difficulty adjustments that happen approximately every 2 weeks. I think it's every 2,000 something blocks, but it's every 2 weeks. But anyways, this clip went semi-viral, about 500,000 views. And so I got in touch with people from the BSV community. And so I also, when I went to ETH Denver, I just so happened to be at a little bar thing, having drinks with some people. And I met somebody named Ty and a young lady named Kate. And talking to them, they said they were from the BSV community. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never, last week I talked to Kurt, who's about to be our guest for today. And that was the first time I'd ever talked to anybody from the BSV community. And there's a lot of history behind this. And these people are really dedicated to the original vision of Satoshi Nakamoto. and the original Bitcoin white paper, which says a peer-to-peer digital cash. Whereas today, when we look at BTC, we don't think that at all. We think store of value, but store of value doesn't transmit fees, which hence my post right here and the problem that we had right there. So guys, we're going to bring Mr. Kurt up right now. Give me a second. Let me do this. Let's see. Why isn't that working? What's going on? Hold on. Guys, let's take a little... Let me see what's going on. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me. Bear with me for just a second, guys. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, that worked. I'm not exactly sure. Let's see if Kurt's messaging me. But wasn't BSV back? Yes. But there's a lot of FUD that I want to get into relating to that. And so, okay, he said computer locked up. Give him 2 minutes. No problem at all. No problem at all. But yeah, so it was from OG Craig Wright. And if you don't know Craig Wright, he's somebody that has a history of saying a lot of stuff that may or may not be true, a lot of claims of Satoshi, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of litigation and things like that. But from my understanding, and I haven't talked to Kurt about this, but that the BSV community, they're into the vision of BSV, but Craig Wright might not be really entirely involved anymore. And so we're going to get into it. You know, some of the things I want to go over is I want us to explain the history lesson of what it is. And we'll come back to this in just a second. But explain the history lesson of how did BSV even come to be? It's a fork of Bitcoin. And so, yeah, I want to get into that. But yes, you are right, OG. Hey, there we go.
Hey. I was compiling stuff with Claude Code, and I think it was too much for my computer and then wouldn't go live.
Oh, man, it's okay. I thought it was me. I was like, because I edited the overlay this morning, you know, to have the right text and everything on it. But I was like, dang, was it me? So then I called in from my phone, and then the mic started going.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I had to kill everything, reboot the computer, and I think we're good.
We're good. Okay, man. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Been a busy day, productive day, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So we already have a couple questions up, and we're getting to some of these questions after. But first, tell us a little bit about you, about Kurt yourself, and when you do your show. I know you do a live stream on Tuesday, and what else do you do, and how can people find you?
I do a bunch of stuff. So people can check my content at kurtwuckertjr.com. I am the co-founder of a company called Gorilla Pool, which you can find at gorillapool.com. We offer mining infrastructure. We have a multi-state operation hosting hash power for people. Get into the power arbitrage side of business, but primarily run the pool and host ASICs for people. And then we also own a software development firm. I have a cybersecurity background myself, and hooked up with some of the best Bitcoin devs in the history of the game. And we build basically smart contracts and token contracts and those kind of things for people. We also do penetration testing against other people's software. And we do all kinds of stuff in the space. But our focus is, man, use Bitcoin for stuff that it was supposed to be used for. It is a business tool. And most people, they think they get a Ledger Nano and sit on their coins and they're a Bitcoiner. And I tell you, you're not a Bitcoiner until you've built something on it, in it, or with it. And so that's where I'm at on that story.
And so let me ask you, when you say Bitcoin, are you talking about BSV or are you talking about what everyone else considers Bitcoin?
So for me, it's the protocol, right? Like Bitcoin. Okay. Bitcoin is a set of rules, and when you start with Bitcoin, you can do all kinds of things with it. Now, there's things you can do on BTC, and we've done projects on BTC. We supported the Ordinals project and stuff like that. We've used to work quite a bit in the Bitcoin Cash space. I was a Bitcoin casher. But BSV is the only version of Bitcoin where we said, okay, what was Bitcoin in 2009? And like, okay, turn all that stuff back on. Like, let's get back to where we are. So a lot of people don't realize that BTC has more than half of the opcodes, which are the scripting language in Bitcoin, is just turned off. And so you could have made a smart contract on Bitcoin in 2009 or 2010, and it would not have run in 2013, 14, 15. And then they added stuff in 2016, 17, 18, and then another like Taproot and stuff in 2020 to make it like this newfangled thing. And so I would argue like BTC is an implementation of the Bitcoin protocol, but it's the Bitcoin protocol plus a bunch of other ideas. Whereas BSV truly is just an implementation of the Bitcoin protocol. And so it's one of those things where it's a little bit political. And I understand, people feel how they feel. And, the greatest proof of work is indeed on BTC. And therefore, the argument for BTC being Bitcoin, like I understand, but it's also Bitcoin plus a lot of ideas that aren't Bitcoin ideas. And so Bitcoin itself, if it's a rule system and if it's a hard money system and a hard money doesn't change, I would argue BSV is Bitcoin on those grounds. But I'm very happy to say that Bitcoin is the underlying protocol that underlies BTC, BCH, BSV, but also things like Litecoin, Dash, Digibyte. Like those are all Bitcoin plus other things tacked onto them too.
Right. That's an interesting way to look at it. And I think I'm not exactly sure who the audience is, so I want to start from a point of view of only thinking the Bitcoin that we know today in ETFs is the only Bitcoin that's ever existed.
That's fair. I mean, that's 99% of people look at it that way.
Right. Yes, sir. So could you walk us through a little history lesson of how we went from Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash and why that fork came about? And maybe we could even get into a little bit of simple of what a fork is for people.
Sure.
And then how BSV came out after that from Bitcoin Cash.
Yep. Sure. I mean, it's in a lot of ways, it's a complicated story, but actually it's really simple. So I was working on a project using counterparty token protocol on Bitcoin in 2015. They had customers like Magic the Gathering and some of these people that wanted to issue playing cards as tokens on Bitcoin. And they were working on it. There was lots of stuff. The Rare Peppy project that came out, all the frogs and that kind of stuff, that all started on Bitcoin. Those were Bitcoin tokens. Well, that really ticked off one particular developer named Luke Dash Jr., who's still around. And he was at the time the sole editor of the BIP repo. BIP stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. And so if you had an idea for a way to change Bitcoin in some novel way, you had to get it through him before it would be discussed in GitHub. And then before that, that change would be merged into Bitcoin Core and thus becoming, Bitcoin by default. In 2015, he looked at it and said, okay, we're being attacked by this token spam and another company called Satoshi Dice that was using Bitcoin as a basically like a dice spin. And then he bootstrapped the other guy. I can't think of his name, legendary Bitcoin guy. But he had this casino, and there were card games, dice games, and whatever. And it was called Satoshi Dice, and really great. One of the major uses of Bitcoin was most of the transactions in 2014 and 15 came from Satoshi Dice. Well, Luke monolithically looked at it and said, that's an attack on Bitcoin. This is spam. We're under cyber attack. And he limited the op return output to, I think it was 40 kilobytes, which means that all the little application data that you had to put into Bitcoin to make any of these apps work, the tokens, the dice, whatever, just broke it. And so if you had a Bitcoin business that was using op return any bigger than 40 kilobytes in 2015, all of a sudden your business disappeared overnight because of one guy. And that really kicked off the Bitcoin civil war. So a bunch of those guys were like, hey, Bitcoin is censorship resistant money. Bitcoin is not supposed to change. It is supposed to work the same yesterday, today, and forever. And this guy somehow got into a position where he could turn my business off, and that guy's the enemy. Well, those people immediately spun up a new client. That client was called Bitcoin XT. It was in consensus with Bitcoin BTC. It was coded up by Gavin Andreessen, who was the lead developer of Bitcoin Core at the time, and another guy named Mike Hearn, who was another significant contributor to Bitcoin. And they said, hey, this one has an optional, adaptable block size limit and has bigger script limits to let people run their damn businesses on Bitcoin. And they got ruthlessly kicked out of the Bitcoin community. Over the next 18 months, it turned into an absolute nightmare for those guys. They were bullied out of the repo. They were kicked out of like Reddit forums, all kinds of things. Like, hey, if you start talking about any of these other things, these things, like it became the de facto opinion in Bitcoin that if you wanted businesses to run on Bitcoin, you weren't a Bitcoiner anymore. And so you weren't even allowed to be in the debate. And so those people over the next 18 months really turned into what became the Bitcoin Cash community. They were like, look, like somehow Bitcoin got hijacked by these people that just like hate our businesses. And we need to make Bitcoin work for business. That's what it is. It's a payments tool. Why would we not use a payments tool in business? And so then Bitcoin Cash split away from Bitcoin Core in August of 2017. Really unfortunate. I think the whole thing really sucks because it really was kind of the OG Bitcoiners that wanted Bitcoin to just stay Bitcoin. And then the small blockers, the BTC people are like, hey, we're going to add another 50,000 lines of code to the repo to add in SegWit, which creates this whole new Merkle tree and like all this other stuff, like a bunch of new technical debt added to Bitcoin Core. And the Bitcoin Cashers split away. Just about a year later, there was a similar split up among the BCH people. SV node was created to continue to grow the block size limit and do lots of other cool things. And they kind of did the same thing to the BSV people that the core people did to the Bitcoin Cash people the year before. They're like, these new, like, we don't want to do that. And we're like, hey, we all agreed we were going back to Bitcoin, right? And most people agreed, but for whatever reason, the lead developer of the main Bitcoin Cash client pulled the exact same scam on us and split us away from Bitcoin Cash. And we're like, how many times is this going to happen? But it was a nightmare era of people who just like, they wanted to be in charge. There's always some guy who's in charge of the GitHub repo who wants to tell you what Bitcoin is. And it's like, look, Bitcoin is crystal clear. There is a white paper that defines what it is. There is a protocol spec that was put out by its inventor that is connected to the white paper. This isn't even actually debatable. And it turned into a war. Like it just was really unbelievable. But now BSV has been split away from the other networks since 2018. We've turned on all the opcodes. We've eliminated the block size limit. So there is no block size limit on BSV. And we've shown like, hey, everything that you could build on Ethereum or Solana or ICP or any of these other networks, they could have always been on Bitcoin. And if they were on Bitcoin, I think we would have taken over the world already. But instead, we've got 50 networks, 50 major networks, and then another probably 10,000 minor networks that it's all split. So all that brain power is split across thousands of different things. We're not working together, and it's to our detriment. It's made it that we are less free, we're less coordinated, and it turned crypto into like this giant scam economy of I'm just going to trade this and trade. Like it turned everybody into a trader instead of, hey, we all have this one massive useful tool, and now there's all these little specialized tools that don't talk to each other, and it is like the least efficient way to treat the technology. And that's the short version. This could be a 10-hour episode if you wanted to get into the details.
Yeah. And so whenever the split like that happens, right, a fork, for anyone that doesn't know, right, and correct me if I'm wrong. So I guess you have a certain amount of time to update the miners. And then if whoever 51%, whatever they are, 51 plus whatever is, that becomes Bitcoin as we know now, right? And the rest of the miners fork off into another fork, correct?
So Bitcoin is designed to potentially fork every 10 minutes, right? Like it's designed to listen to all the nodes. All the nodes have to agree that all the rules have been followed across the whole network. And if one person adds 1 kilobyte of something that isn't in the rules of all the other nodes, they are kicked off the network. That node should come back into consensus with the main chain. That's the way Bitcoin was designed to work. It was designed under the presumption that there was one blockchain. What they did for Bitcoin Cash is they specifically added a piece of code that said, look, we don't want to come back into consensus with BTC. We want to permanently split forever on purpose. And so that is what I call a planned hard fork and a planned split of the network. Like we are just leaving. This is a secession. And so that's I think a key differentiator is that Bitcoin should fork. Bitcoin is supposed to have forks for the sake of disagreement, because that's what people do. People negotiate by disagreeing. And ultimately, we want more hash power to come our way. But the way it was fought, it's kind of technical, so I don't want to get real into it. But I was not in favor of forcing that split on purpose. I believed we should have left in the ability for us to reorg each other. And I think it's entirely possible that Bitcoin Cash could have become the main chain in 2017, because if it was more profitable to mine and it was technically the real Bitcoin, it should have been able to orphan BTC. But it was decided a month before the split happened that, like, no, we're just not even going to try to do a reorganization and try to absorb the invalid chain. So it's just bad strategy on that front. And then BSV did not have reorg protection. We wanted to reorg and orphan Bitcoin Cash in order for essentially BSV to become the real Bitcoin Cash. But it just a lot of weird politics and stuff that went into it. But yeah, forking and splitting and all these kind of things, it's pretty nuanced, and a lot of people don't understand the game theory in practice. But yeah, does that answer your question? I feel like I wandered a little bit on that one.
No, it definitely does. And yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of egos that got involved throughout all the block wars and all the early days of Bitcoin. I want to get into some other stuff in a little bit. But so if we looked at the code, and I wouldn't know what I was looking at, just to be fully transparent. I'm not super technical coder guy. You know, maybe I could vibe code something. You know, I need to pick up a lot a little more. But so if we were to look at BSV's code, is it truly exactly what was on during the Genesis block of BTC? Or how close is it to the original Bitcoin?
So from a code standpoint, it's quite similar. If you were to look at SV node as it stands today, written in C++, just like the original Satoshi client, it's probably 95% the same code that Satoshi Nakamoto wrote himself. The only differences would be efficiency. But where I take it and say, like, okay, if we're talking about Bitcoin as a protocol, what we're talking about is rules. So there are lots of ways to express rules. You can write those rules in Golang or Rust or all kinds of things. As long as the rules are followed, it doesn't actually matter how it's coded precisely. So the difference in these things, and the reason that there were splits, is that Bitcoin Cash created a rule change. So it was like, hey, we are willing to accept a block that is larger than 1 megabyte. So if on BTC you try to mine a block that is 1 megabyte plus 1 kilobyte, you have forked yourself off the network. Okay, so Bitcoin Cash started with an 8 megabyte block size limit, and the way they made the split permanent is by mining a block that was bigger than could be accepted by BTC. And so that was how they forced the split. So that node will never resync with BTC while those rules are there. Now, if for some reason the Bitcoin Core network were to change their block size limit to, I think it would have to be 32 megabytes at this point. If they were to change it and they were to remove one line of code from Bitcoin Cash, in theory, they could be looking to reorg each other. And that's how it works. So it's about rules. It's not specifically about how each line of code is actually written, but there's a subset in the code that defines protocol rules. And if you break a protocol rule, that's when you get the split.
Okay, I understand. So more about intent versus actual code.
And to answer your basic question, what BSV did was re-implemented the original rules of Bitcoin as stated in 2009. So that's the real difference. Is it allows, okay, we accept transactions that include this opcode, that opcode, this opcode, and all there's a few dozen of them, but most of them are turned off in BTC. A good chunk of them are still turned off in Bitcoin Cash as well. And then Bitcoin Cash and BTC have also added new opcodes to those networks too. So those would have to change. So there's lots of little rules that are different on each network. But BSV is all of the original rules from the original Bitcoin protocol.
So in the original Bitcoin protocol, there was no block size limit, or?
Correct.
Okay, so there was no block size limit at all.
No block size limit. There was a practical limit of 32 megabytes, but it wasn't a hard-coded limit. It had more to do with database limitations that were inherent in the protocol. But if you were to update those database rules, in theory, you could have mined a gigabyte or a 10 gigabyte block on Bitcoin in 2009 or 10.
Mm-hmm. What do you think was the true driver behind the small blocks? But and so people know there was the big blockers and the small blockers, little blockers like Adam Back and those folks. And then I want to get into some conspiracies in a little bit. But what do you think was the true intent behind that? Because it's limited Bitcoin in so many ways, like just my fees that I've talked about, and just the fees alone are limited because of what can necessarily be built and things like that. So what do you think was the true intention of limiting Bitcoin?
The first reason was actually totally benign. It was Hal Finney said, hey, this network is poorly connected. And it's basically running on a bunch of amateurs' laptops. And so there is a major DOS attack mechanism. Like if somebody were to send too many transactions, Bitcoin will fall over the whole network. And he was right. And so he throttled the input until the network could more specifically professionalize, basically until nodes could be run in server centers and that kind of thing that could handle more traffic. Satoshi was very clear about that. There was another developer named Ray Dillinger who was very clear about that. And Hal Finney himself was very clear about that it was a temporary security mechanism put there to keep Bitcoin safe when it was in the cradle. Now that, for whatever reason, and I am absolutely going to go the conspiracy direction, everybody was a big blocker. Adam Back had his 248 plan. He posted about it on Twitter. You can still see the tweet. He hasn't even deleted it, where he said, hey, Bitcoin should have a 2 megabyte block size limit, then a 4 megabyte and an 8 megabyte. Like, we're going to do it safe just to make sure we don't screw it up. But that's the direction we're going because we want more payments on Bitcoin. Same with Peter Wella, who is one of the guys who's contributed more code to Bitcoin Core ever. He had a doubling plan. So it was 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 that he sketched out. It was actually proposed as a BIP in the BIP repo. So he saw the same thing. And then all of a sudden, and this has finally been confirmed, Jeffrey Epstein shows up with investment from a guy named Joi Ito. He's going to launder some money through a Japanese venture capital firm to capitalize Blockstream and capitalize the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, which between those two entities paid essentially all of the Bitcoin Core devs. They started putting out pitch decks. Let's see if we can raise some money from Reid Hoffman and New York Life Insurance and AXA Global, and a bunch of these old world financial institutions who Jeffrey represented. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, hey, there's nothing more important than the 1 megabyte block size limit, but we're going to create the Lightning Network. We're going to create Liquid Network, and you can pay us to run those things for you. Like, we're going to productize payments over Bitcoin, but turn themselves into that trusted third party that's taking fees out of the cut. So they saw the opportunity to basically turn themselves into the new world, Visa or MasterCard, the way I see it. And, as soon as that cash started flowing, all of a sudden that became the unbreakable rule in Bitcoin, and anybody that opposed it was ruthlessly kicked out so they could keep raising money.
Yeah, when you start having all that money come in, the next thing you know, all you eat is pizza and grape soda, right?
Indeed.
Anybody has been following the files can. So it sounds like your opinion, which is mine, is that it was a monetary thing, not what's necessarily best for Bitcoin. but in a way that Blockstream could be profitable. While we're on the Epstein stuff, I was going to get into this a little later, but it's a good segue. You know, I've seen a lot of FUD around different companies, like, oh, he invested in Coinbase, he invested in this. And look, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that met with the man and that it was pure business, right? It had nothing to do with pizza parties. But obviously there's plenty of data showing, you know, the opposite. Do you think, how involved do you think he truly was with the original Bitcoin core team? Do you think it was just purely an investment that he was trying to make and trying to make some money off of? Or do you think he had a deeper vision for Bitcoin to use it in some way, shape, or form?
So I've spent a lot of the last month and a half going through these files. I think it's very clear that Jeffrey was not interested in money at all. He was an intelligence asset. I think it's very clear that his money came from Les Wexner, who was the founder of Victoria, or not the founder, but he's the guy that took over Victoria's Secret.
Right.
He seemed to be the guy that funded Jeffrey to do whatever else he was doing. And then depending who you ask, he was either a Russian intelligence asset, or he was an Israeli intelligence asset, or he was a CIA. Like everybody wants him to be somebody else's intelligence asset, but he was very clearly leveraging important people. And if you read the emails about him, he wasn't just looking for, hey, this might be a good idea, I should invest in this. He was explicitly saying, how do we control Bitcoin? And so his contacts were saying, well, we got these guys at MIT, and we got these guys over here at Blockstream. Like, those are the guys you want to bring out. So it's like, all right, well, let's bring Adam back out to the island, and let's connect him to Reid Hoffman, and Austin Hill is actually really, really key. Austin Hill is the actual business mind behind Blockstream, and Jeffrey and Austin real close. They're all from Palm Beach County, Florida, which happens to be where I live. But if there's a Palm Beach connection between anything, I got none of that, man. I'll be at church on Sunday, but. The Palm Beach connection on this stuff. If there's a Palm Beach guy involved and Jeffrey Epstein involved, it was real deep, and so it was his explicit intention to take over Bitcoin. It was not a circumstantial thing, much the same as it was with lots of other things. Like, he was intentionally trying to leverage Bill Gates and leverage all kinds of military and powerful intelligence assets and all kinds of things. He wanted leverage on everybody, and it was for the sake of control. Now, upstream, like, where was this all going? I can only imagine who is the ultimate puppet string puller on this, but it was very clear what his intentions were.
Wow. Yeah, it's hopefully we get the other files, but what is it, 3 million?
We'll see.
Or something.
I'm real curious to see. There's a huge gap from 99 to 2003. Like, we got stuff from the 90s and we got stuff from after 2003, but that whole 2000 election and 9/11 era, there is nothing. Wow. And so very curious to see what's in there. Now, what a lot of people may not remember is that the 2000 election was very, very contentious, and it was only a few hundred votes in one county in Florida that actually pushed it over to Bush. And what county was it? Palm Beach County, Florida. So we don't have those files yet. So I'm real curious to see George W. Bush and if there's any connection there. And then ultimately the whole 9/11 thing happened 18 months later. And I think it could get a lot weirder if we get all those files out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's something deep to think about. Yeah, I was just so let's get more into Epstein. No, I'm joking. No, we're a little bit more into. So, pivoting back to BSV a little bit. I was gonna save that for the end, but it came up. My reference, and then
it's a wild ride. The more you get into them, man.
Yeah, but hey, it's the truth. It's a part of the story, right? And so that's what we're here to say. Well, Craig Wright. I want to get into Craig. Like, we had this comment earlier. Wasn't BSV backed by OG Craig Wright? We got BSV is the real Bitcoin. Very rich conversation. Oh, thank you, buddy. But let's get back to this one. So, Craig Wright's somebody, and correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but he said he was Satoshi. I'm pretty sure there's been litigation and lawsuits overseas regarding
bunch of it.
A lot of things that that Craig has done. And so what was Craig's involvement in BSV, and what currently is Craig's involvement in BSV? Because I think this is the one thing that holds a lot of people back from it. And
sure,
whenever we clip this, I'll find this tweet. But Colin, a guy that I respect that does technical analysis on crypto and stuff, he was talking about Bitcoin Cash. And I was like, hey, what do you think about BSV? He's like, oh, no, it's a scam from Craig Wright. You know, and so, and
Colin,
I think
what is Colin's last name? I know a Colin Bitcoin Casher from a long time ago. Does he use his last name? I don't want to dox him if he's private.
Yeah, no, he's on X. He's like an influencer guy.
Okay.
But I'll whenever the clip comes out, and Chili cut out all the fluff. But whenever that's my clipper, Chili Pepper. He's a great guy. But I'll find that tweet and I'll put it up. But
cool.
But you know, I think a lot of people see Craig Wright and they just write it off. They're like, oh yeah, it is a scam. You know what I mean? And that's one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to do this after meeting you, after meeting Kate and Ty in person and talking to them and them telling me their story about BSV. So what was Craig's involvement with BSV when it initially forked from Bitcoin Cash? And what is his involvement now?
So Craig, just like a lot of us, like I was just an old Bitcoiner. I became an old Bitcoin casher and then became a BSVer by just not compromising on what Bitcoin is supposed to be. And Craig is actually the same story. Craig became a public person in 2015 against his will. He was outed by Wired and Gizmodo magazine, like outed as Satoshi Nakamoto with his partner, basically the guy that helped edit the white paper and some other stuff, a guy named Dave Kleiman. Dave Kleiman also appears in the Epstein files, by the way. He was the forensic the forensic researcher hired by the Palm Beach County courthouse to go over Jeffrey Epstein's hard drives. And that was his job. That's the kind of stuff he did. He's a military veteran. And so there's a real interesting bit of story going back there, because Craig used to work in high stakes security for British intelligence, hunting global human traffickers as well. And so really interesting stuff there. The connections get real crazy there too. But Craig was a very secretive person. Satoshi Nakamoto's email got hacked in 2014. Somebody got into Satoshi's email, then in Satoshi's email started emailing the Bitcoin core developers and guys like Thamos on Reddit and stuff and saying, hey, I know who Satoshi is. I broke into his email. I have his whole inbox and outbox so I can see exactly who he is and all this stuff. I want 25,000. I think he wanted 25,000 Bitcoins at the time for silence and all this stuff. Well, the same day that happened, Craig Wright in 2014, a person whose name nobody had ever heard before, Craig Wright leaves his house forever in Australia with his family. He's got 2 little kids and his wife, and he says, we got to get out of here. He goes on the run for about 6 or 7 months, goes and finds a gambling industry tycoon. He used to do cybersecurity for the gambling industry, reaches out to a guy named Stephen Matthews and says, hey, I'm under attack. Somebody just stole all my files. I have basically burned down all my servers, and I'm in hiding right now. Where the hell do I go? Stephen Matthews says, you need to come to the Philippines, and we're gonna figure this out. Has him meet a guy named Calvin Ayre. Calvin Ayre is another gambling industry tycoon. He was the founder of Bodog. He's a self-made billionaire from Canada. Well, they got together. They say, hey, Craig Wright's Satoshi Nakamoto, he just got doxxed. He got outed by some hacker. We don't know who the hacker is, but Craig's life is probably in danger because of just the nature of the people who were involved in Bitcoin circa 2014. And what are we going to do? So they hire a PR firm and say, okay, we got to get in front of this. So we got to figure out how we can make Craig a public person for his safety so that Craig doesn't just get killed somewhere in the middle of the night for all the Satoshi Bitcoins, because it was a lot of money at that time. Amid that, all of a sudden reporters start reaching out to Craig like, hey, I'm from Wired magazine. We received a tranche of information from an anonymous source saying that you're Satoshi Nakamoto. Would you like to comment? Well, no, I wouldn't like to comment. I want to have nothing to do with it. I don't know what you're talking about. Then he started getting the same thing from Gizmodo. So the hacker was shopping things out to various media outlets to try to out Satoshi Nakamoto. It's a huge scoop. Well, before Craig was able to get his PR plan out, Wired and Gizmodo push out this article explaining the whole Satoshi story. Here's Craig Wright and Dave Kleiman, and here's all the stuff they did to create Bitcoin and push it out, and blah, 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 blah. Well, Craig Wright shows up on the scene and says, well, I didn't want any of this. I wanted my privacy, obviously, because I released Bitcoin under a pseudonym, and I basically wanted to be left alone. I have left the project and don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, it was a media sensation. The media sensation went on for about 6 months. They tried to bring him into, GQ magazine, and they tried to bring him up and onto the BBC and all this stuff, and realized this guy's a real pain in the ass. Craig is autistic. He's got a personality disorder. Like, he is not a camera-ready person by most measures. And so people look at him and they're like, there's no way this guy can be Satoshi Nakamoto. And so the campaign against Craig with the small blockers get ramped up huge. Now, Craig then started answering questions. They're like, okay, well, what do you think about Bitcoin? What can you do with it? And Craig starts talking about, and this is 2015. This is before Ethereum existed. This is before anybody knew any of this stuff. He starts talking about recursive smart contracts and all of these things. Like, imagine if you could have a transaction that had in the tail of the transaction a payment that would then trigger another transaction, allowed you to have a looping machine over Bitcoin script, and then allowed you to have, complex escrow and all. Like, he's explaining stuff that nobody had ever talked about in Bitcoin before. Well, all of a sudden people start getting real scared. They're like, oh, this guy, whoever he is doing stuff with this technology that none of us ever thought was possible. And so then the Blockstream people, who were just starting to raise their money from the people we were talking about before, they start saying, there's no way Craig Wright's Satoshi. They became so committed to crapping on Craig's legacy immediately. Like, he's a scammer. He's got this tax fraud hanging over his head, like all this stuff. They started digging in on him immediately. And so Craig spins up this company with Calvin and Stefan and a couple other people. They call it nChain. nChain is a research company, shows up with like 1,000 patents on Bitcoin related technology going back to 2011. So Craig had been working on patents for stuff you can do with Bitcoin that you can't do in any other way from 2011 to 2015. And he commercializes it in the UK in 2015, starts pushing all this stuff like, I'm Satoshi, here's the patents I've been working on the last 6 or 7 years. And, which I think is more evidence that he's Satoshi. But the Bitcoin civil war is heating up, and some of his patents use technology that is specifically being turned off by the Bitcoin core developers. And so nChain starts saying, hey, you can't go turn this off in Bitcoin. Like, I actually have a patent on that technology, and you're changing what's supposed to be a fixed protocol. They start threatening legal stuff and like, hey, Bitcoin core dev, you're just a dude. Like, you don't even have an LLC to sue, so I will sue you as a person for making this malicious change to Bitcoin. Well, so he contributed very much to the Bitcoin civil war narrative. Then in 2017, when the split happened, Bitcoin Cash was the one that went the direction of, hey, here's Bitcoin unencumbered. And so nChain became a Bitcoin Cash focused company. And then when the split happened between BCH and BSV, it was the same thing. Like, okay, I guess we're a BSV company. But Craig had been working on a huge commercialization plan for Bitcoin since 2011. Now he has, in much the same way that I have, became closely associated with BSV because, hey, I have a long-term vision and a huge amount of things that I have been working on and inventing and trying to commercialize that keeps getting undermined by random devs around the world. And it's a nightmare. And so Craig being in BSV is not intentional. In fact, Craig publicly opposed both splits. Bitcoin Cash, when it split, he was like, this is insane. Bitcoin doesn't split. This isn't how it's supposed to work. And then the same thing with BSV. So the same thing, like, this is insane. How do we keep getting hijacked by by these weird groups of largely anonymous developers and a bunch of people that don't want to see the technology commercialized? They just want it to be an investment asset. And so the very short version is, yes, Craig is closely associated to BSV, but it wasn't his choice. And it was very specifically because he'd been working on Bitcoin protocol stuff. And if you were patenting things or inventing things that were relevant to the Bitcoin protocol before 2017, today they only work on BSV. And that's really the whole story.
So by default, a little bit, or, you know, if he wants to use what he built, kind of like what you were saying earlier, if you built anything, your company went to nothing overnight whenever those changes were made. And is he still involved with the BSV community? Is that company you mentioned, is that still working? Is he still developing on BSV?
There has been a lot of change in the last 2 years. This all kind of culminated into all those same people, Blockstream, Square Crypto, MicroStrategy, a bunch of these companies came together. They formed a group called the Crypto Open Patent Alliance. Their stated goal was to consolidate patents such that nobody else can patent Bitcoin technology. And the first thing they did is collect money together to sue Craig Wright in UK court to get a demand in UK case law that Craig Wright is the only person on earth who definitely is not Satoshi Nakamoto, and any of his claims are therefore invalid. I think that's more evidence that the people who know that he's the biggest threat because of what he knows and what he's done. They won that case. So in the UK, Craig is not allowed to say he's Satoshi Nakamoto. And when that happened, Craig left the UK. He lived in London from, I think, 2015 until 2022 or 3. And he left. He moved to Asia. He's blogging quite a bit, explaining what he's working on, but he's a little bit in stealth mode and working on things that apply deliberately to BSV. He actually released a paper, it was a day or two ago, explaining how to get a Bitcoin node to be able to do 1 billion transactions per second. So he's working on scalability, the likes of which, I mean, literally 10 orders of magnitude more than anybody else is talking about. And he claims he's got a breakthrough that he's going to be pushing out in the near future and that kind of thing. But he's one of the largest patent holders in world history, so more so than like Thomas Edison and other legendary inventors. And he looks at it and says, you know what? You can all hate me. You can all say I'm a liar and a fraud. I'm gonna beat everybody. So he is indomitable, but he is indomitable from perhaps a hut in Thailand or Vietnam or somewhere else at this point.
So do you believe him? Do you believe the story? Do you think Craig Wright is Satoshi?
I have looked into it more than probably any other independent person. If Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto, he's been pretending to be for about 18 years at this point. So, and I think that's actually the point. Satoshi Nakamoto is not a real person; it's a moniker, right? And I think it was a different group of people depending on the era. I think Craig created the moniker Satoshi Nakamoto. He hired out people to do different things. Dave Kleiman being one of them, helped me edit the white paper, that kind of thing. He also bought some of the cryptography from some other people. People want to debate the details of the story, but it's kind of like the Epstein files, right? It's like, okay, in court, I went and watched his court case in Miami, and there was 3 million documents that were dumped in that case that were all related to Satoshi. And it's like, okay, who would have 3 million documents about Bitcoin or being Satoshi or comms between Satoshi and all these other people if they weren't Satoshi Nakamoto? Who's going to pretend that hard to be Satoshi? So it boggles the mind to think that someone like him would have wasted that much time. On top of, I mean, he had run a dozen other companies. He's got all these patents. Like, he's got all this other stuff that he's accomplished. So to be pretending to be Satoshi during that whole era and creating this paper trail, it's insanity to me. So I think in a basic sense, Craig is telling the truth about being Satoshi. And I think there's a ton of anomalies on it because he was trying to run away. He was trying to cover up that he was Satoshi for a long time. And then when it came time for a cybersecurity expert to have to resurrect files that he properly destroyed, well, then they look tainted. They're screwed up. It's very difficult for him to prove in court that, and all of his stuff came back. They're like, this file is from 2014. It's not from 2007. And he's like, well, yeah, it's from 2014. That's when I burned down my server because I was running away in the night because hackers were trying to kill me. And then, oh, yeah, sure, Craig. And it's like, okay, yeah, that would make sense if he only had 20 files that maybe he created, but It was millions of files that are all time-stamped at 2014 in the metadata, showing that these million files were deleted in 2014 and any metadata before that is gone. And so it's a crazy story. It admittedly is probably going to take years, much like the Epstein files, to actually get your head around all the stuff that actually happened. But It's there's also a bunch of weird related stuff there. Wouldn't you know it? When he got sued by Ira Kleiman, which is partially how he got doxxed in the first place, the court case was handled in Palm Beach County Court in Southern Florida, and the judge was Bruce Reinhardt. And for anybody that knows anything about judicial coincidence, Bruce Reinhardt was Jeffrey Epstein's defense attorney during his first case. So Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer was Craig Wright's judge in how this all got kicked off in Palm Beach County Court. So we're right back there again.
Wow. It seems like there's more tie-ins to the files than I ever anticipated. And wow. But getting back on Craig, you know, it sounds like he's a private person. You know, he's not somebody that's always, you know, not making content, doing anything like that. So it doesn't sound like there's a need or a want of attention from him, you know, or to himself. And so it doesn't, you know, sound like he's somebody that would want to lie about that, you know. But I also agree there's a lot of people involved, right? I mean, there's no way one person did it on their own, but he's obviously a very, very smart man. What do you think? Why do you think Satoshi's Bitcoin have never moved? Now, obviously, you could have multiple wallets and, you know, things like that. But why do you think those had never moved? If I was fleeing to go to another country or something, or if I was mad at these people for doing this to me, you know, I would want to dump it all or something. Do you think he lost the keys to it? Do you think what do you think?
I don't know. I have a few theories. Ultimately, that like it's just speculation. I would argue that it's one of two things are the most likely. The first one is he doesn't have the damn keys, right? Like everybody speculates, well, Satoshi must be dead because who could not cash in, you know, $100 billion worth of Bitcoin or whatever, right? Now, the other possibility is that, well, if we assume that Satoshi Nakamoto is a brilliant polymath, autistic, you know, highly committed person who set rules in motion that he was going to do some very specific thing with these coins. And that's really the profile of Craig Wright. You know, Craig will tell you he set up a series of trusts that are built like an onion that make it that he cannot spend the coins. He doesn't have the keys because he's got these trustees that are spread out and all this other stuff. And, you know, so maybe he doesn't have the keys for procedural reasons, but could get them under, you know, perfect circumstances. But it's really hard to know. You know, Satoshi Nakamoto was clearly a very disciplined person. He's not an average person. And so, you know, it could just be like, hey, we're dealing with somebody that has a very unique view of wealth and what they create and the purpose of it. Satoshi was also very clearly not into the financial aspect of Bitcoin being a good investment. Like he wanted to talk about payments technology and all this cool stuff that Bitcoin was capable to do technologically. And so he could be one of those people that doesn't care, you know, like you hear stories about guys that are, you know, a jewel thief or something. And then you go find like, oh, he wasn't selling the jewels. He just threw them in the river. Like he liked to do the crazy thing, you know, and like, there are just people like that. So ultimately we don't know. Maybe Epstein has the keys.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. Yeah. And, Epstein's closer to Satoshi Nakamoto than most people will want to admit. True. And we'll get to some of the questions unrelated. We'll get to those later, but comments will pop up now. And so with BSV, I bought it and I did get me a bag. And I found there was like an orange something that I could go through. I think Mexi has BSV still, but I mean, it's been delisted from a lot of places. And why is this? And I'm going to assume that this is all going to tie back to the FUD campaign, you know, with Craig Wright. But why is there so much FUD against BSV? Because I don't see that for Bitcoin Cash. I don't like I see it's available more places. It's, you know, you know, so why is it, is there so much scrutiny against BSV? and it's so hard to acquire it. Yet it's still a $300 million market cap, right? So it's still got plenty of liquidity.
Yep. So it goes back to, I think it was 2019, 2020, when Craig Wright really started threatening to sue people. He got into it with Peter McCormick, the former gigantic Bitcoin podcaster. He got into it with Hodlnaut, who was a anonymous cat figure, small blocker person on Twitter. And, these people were calling him a fraud and really pushing his buttons. And Craig doesn't have control of his anger. Frankly, he has various mental illnesses that make him unable to deal with criticisms in ways that we wish he would. But he started saying like, "Hey, I'm going to find you. I'm going to sue you to death," and all this stuff. And then it started with CZ from Binance. He tweeted about it. He's like, "You know what? All this shit needs to stop." His words. And said, if this doesn't stop right now, we're delisting BSV. Well, then Coinbase jumps on and says the same thing. Like, yeah, inside of crypto, we don't sue each other. This isn't how things work. Coinbase will delist BSV too. So it turned into this like, hey, we're going to stand up and stand against this guy. And he's, intrinsically connected to BSV. And then I think for very practical reasons, when Binance and Coinbase delist the asset, all these other exchanges, they're basically using Binance and Coinbase either for custody or as liquidity partners and all these other things. It makes it that a lot of the second tier exchanges kind of can't offer BSV by default because they really are just a wrapper around an API from Binance or Coinbase. And so they knew they could cut off the liquidity at the knees by doing that. And then so another half a dozen fell immediately because they were like, well, we don't offer BSV if Binance doesn't offer BSV. And then a few others joined on for similar reasons, which created then they're like, hey, now you fell beneath our liquidity threshold, so we're delisting you. And it's just like, okay, it did create a cascade event that made it difficult to purchase. And so you can still pick it up at KuCoin, which is the biggest exchange in Korea. You can pick it up at BitThumb, which used to be a huge Asian exchange. I don't know what they are now. They're probably number 10 in the world. They used to be number 1 back in the day. But there's a few other places. You mentioned MEXC, and then Orange Gateway is an Icelandic exchange run by an old school Bitcoiner. He's another guy like me, got into Bitcoin in 2012 and is like, man, I am so sick of this nonsense. He delisted everything else. Like, I'm delisting markets for BTC and Ethereum. Like, I'm going to be the CZ guy. We only offer BSV pairs. Like, come to me if you want to buy the BSV. And cool guy, but similar thing. Certainly not as much impact as CZ from Binance, but they're a BSV committed exchange that used to be. They're called Orange Gateway because orange was Bitcoin's color, and he'd been running that exchange for, I don't even know, since 2013 or 14. And he turned it into a pure BSV exchange as a middle finger to the to the crypto world, basically.
So I met with Kate and Ty at East Denver, and she told me, she said, we're the only community that doesn't care about the price, which I'm like mind boggled from. Like, I just spent the whole first half of this stream looking at the price. Everybody's depressed because, I don't want to say that loosely, but everybody's all upset about the price and no altcoins either, no whatever, you know how it goes. But she said that, and so, which I think for a certain amount of adoption, you do want to see price go up because there's a lot of people that want to buy the asset to see it appreciate, right? But what's your vision with BSV? If we look at the next 5 to 10 years, let's say, what's your vision with it, and how do those things that happened in the past of all the delistings and things like that get amended to potentially being able to grow BSV adoption?
Yep. So there's a few ways to look at it. I mine BSV. We're the second largest or third largest, depending on the day, BSV mining pool. So for me, the price of BSV absolutely matters. But if BSV were to go to $5 and sit there forever, but there were 1 billion transactions a day on the network, we'd be getting all those transaction fees. We would actually be okay. That would be a good thing, right? It's the McDonald's model versus the steakhouse model. Like, you have one good steakhouse, the average plate's $300, and you get 100 customers a day. Like, that's okay. versus McDonald's that has, whatever they have, 10,000 stores globally, and they sell a $5 cheeseburger to a billion people. Like that, just two different business models. BSV is that McDonald's model. Like we want everyone on earth to be our customer, and therefore we got to price it to work that way. And so that's one way we win. But I've said for at least 10 years now that Bitcoin's market cap should be relative to everything that gets disrupted by it. And to date, the blockchain economy hasn't disrupted anybody. Like who in finance has lost their job to a blockchain? It's probably almost nobody, right? And so I would look at that and say, look, we have failed to disrupt the mainstream economy. In fact, now we've been absorbed into the mainstream economy in a way that we had to compromise and they didn't, but it was not supposed to be that way. And so I think BSV, it's going to be hard work, but I'm here for it. I want to take down Visa and MasterCard. I want to take down the big custodians, the big investment banks. I want to take down the big data economy. Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey turned themselves into billionaires by selling the data of me and you to all kinds of, to intelligence agencies and to marketing agencies and to who knows what else. And so data is money. And the only way that you can granularly value data is with a blockchain. And it has to be a hyper scalable blockchain capable of nano-sized payments. And there's only one. And so if we can start to give tools to people to help them be more sovereign, to let them log into a website without having to log in with X or log in with Google and give your information to big tech, well, all of a sudden we start to give people that power back. And then every little time they touch something on the screen and they're using a decentralized internet and they're able to communicate across encrypted channels and all these other things, well, that can only be BSV at scale. And so I still think we are going to actually disrupt the real economy. And when 5 or 6 multi-billion-dollar companies start looking at their quarterly reports and being like, man, where the hell did all of our traffic go? I think they're going to be looking at BSV and saying, oh, shoot, they found a way to completely bypass the centralized rails of the internet. And that's what it's going to look like. And if we fail, the other blockchains are going to fail eventually too, because if we don't disrupt something real, the gambling, investment, trading game of crypto, that's just going to go away because that value can't just be fake forever. And I think that's actually what we're seeing in the markets. The last Bitcoin bull market wasn't very impressive, and there was no altcoin season this time around. And I think that is a huge indicator that we are failing to impress. The smart money is moving to like, hey man, this AI boom, why would I be trading meme coins or trading blockchain startups if I can go over to any of these AI startups and 1000x my money? And so they're showing us that data is money. Like the AI boom has showed us that more than anything, but also that the opportunity really only exists if you can actually disrupt real players. And AI is doing that right now. Like we're just looking at IBM having the worst year they've had in 25 years because they're being disrupted. Well, that disruption should have been coming from Bitcoin, but I still think that it will. Because AIs, these especially agent-to-agent AI technology, they want to talk to each other, and they don't want to do it on the open internet because it's inefficient. They want to be able to pay each other with stable coins because they can't get a bank account, but they're looking for ways to make that money. So we're going to put BSV-based stable coins in their hands. We're going to let them communicate over BSV communication channels. We're going to put the internet that they use into BSV transactions, and they're going to look at it and say, oh, this is how we can be autonomous, sovereign agents and completely bypass the completely controlled authoritarian human internet. And that's how I think we win.
I have a question about blocks. So, one thing, we've been following each other a little bit. I don't know. I talk about Caspa a lot. It's a block DAG founded by Jonathan Topolinsky.
I like Caspa for what it's worth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, that's good. We have a question, and I don't mean to be disrespectful and move off of BSV or anything. But there's this question. I'm a Bitcoin holder, but I'll obviously own Caspa. Do you believe 100 blocks per second in VProgs also gets Caspa recognized? And so kind of how I want to pivot off of this question and use it is from what you were just saying about, I think it's funny when I see the guy that made OpenClaw for AI, AI OpenClaw, he's like, I don't want to hear nothing about crypto. Like someone said, and I'm like, well, how do you expect AI agents to pay each other? Like they're not going to Wells Fargo and open it up.
Yep.
But they are going to be doing what I believe is micro payments on blockchain. But whenever we do look at something like traditional Bitcoin, BSV, whatever you call it, with the block time and settlement of 10 minutes for the blocks, how do you see that comparing to something maybe like Caspa that's a block DAG with 100 blocks per second? How do you see that comparison? And even taking Caspa kind of out of it, how are you able to handle micro transactions on something like BSV? Do they just wait till the next 10-minute block comes in, or would there be a scaling solution that kind of batches them? How do you see that playing out?
So we have what's called Terranode. Terranode is the next generation node software, and really like hardware integration that makes all of this possible, right? Like BSV is capable of probably 30,000 transactions a second right now as it stands. But with Terranode, it's been tested. We're running, we call it Gorilla Node over at Gorilla Pool. It's capable of 1 million transactions per second. Now you're right that the block time is 10 minutes, but there's a huge disconnect in people's minds about when a transaction is valid versus when it's settled. And that block time is about reconciliation. Now, in a business, if I send you a payment, you may not go write that payment in your general ledger the same day. You might not even do it in the same month, right? But the payment still happened. The payment has not been reversed or anything else. It's the same as when you go to the restaurant. You swipe your credit card. That's not a settlement. It's an authorization. They check to see if you had the money. If you had the money, they accept it. They let you leave. They're going to settle it in 60 or 90 days. It's totally valid payment. Bitcoin works the exact same way. When you broadcast a transaction peer-to-peer, there is a Merkle proof and the block header that it sends with the payment. And it says that your payment was in your wallet and you sent it to Kurt's wallet. That's a valid payment. 99.9999999% of the time, that is going to be settled at the next settlement period, which will happen at some point in the next 10 minutes. Now, could it be double spent? Sure, maybe. But we are talking about that 0.0000001% chance that is a double spend. And if we're talking about a $50 payment, or in most cases, probably a sub-cent payment, who gives a shit, right? That doesn't matter at all. Now, if you're buying a house, sure, like wait 10 blocks. 10 blocks is a little more than an hour. And that's still faster than if you were buying a house using the escrow system and stuff as it works today. So if you're making, the 5 times in your life that you're going to make a massive payment, sit and wait for a few blocks for that extra security. But for all of our day-to-day commerce, it doesn't matter at all. The reason that Satoshi Nakamoto used Merkle tree system is because a Merkle proof is a cryptographic promise that what you are seeing is either true or false. And if it's true, then you're good. And they've tried to re-engineer BTC as if the edge case is the norm, and that's insane. Like, it is the most insane engineering decision that's ever been made. And I think it was purposely made to stop BTC from being used for payments at all, because they don't want it used for payments. They want it used for custody. They want it to be an investment asset.
Wow. Yeah, we had this comment. That's a great explanation. Me too. I learned a lot. You're obviously very knowledgeable, Kurt, on all of this. I love having folks like you up. Well, so I kind of want to end for this. What do you think happens to what everyone knows as Bitcoin to today? Like, getting back to the post that what we met on about worrying about when the subsidy runs out, or it doesn't even take till 2140 when the subsidy all the way runs out. You know, in 7 years, it's going to be 0.7-ish BTC.
Yeah, less than a Bitcoin.
And and there's, difficulty adjustments and things like that. But what do you think happens to traditional, I'm going to call it traditional Bitcoin, or
sure, the popular
Bitcoin now,
mainstream Bitcoin,
mainstream Bitcoin. There we go. So, what do you think happens to Bitcoin that's in the ETFs, Michael Saylor's Bitcoin, all of that in the next 20 to 30 years with the current path that they're on of, barely taking, a couple 100,000 a day in fees and not using it as what Satoshi's header on the white paper said, a peer-to-peer digital currency or digital cash.
Yep. So we're actually seeing that already. Bitmain has a few subsidiaries, companies like BitDeer. You can look at companies like Marathon Holdings. Marathon is the second largest holder of BTC in a treasury. They're selling their Bitcoin. BitDeer is selling their Bitcoin, but I think it's extra interesting that BitDeer and Bitmain, the largest manufacturer of ASIC chips for Bitcoin mining, they're doing the same thing. And what are they doing? They're pivoting to try to make ASIC chips for AI. And so they're looking at the way the Bitcoin economy has gone, and they're saying, look, this looks like it's going to be over. And the reason is that Bitcoin was so obviously, explicitly made to pay for itself with transaction fees. And BTC discourages transaction fees at every possible turn. And so if the price doesn't just go up a lot forever, it's over. And what can go up a lot forever? Like, it's an insane presumption. It's never happened in the history of the world. And yet you got guys like Michael Saylor, who obviously has every incentive to tell you it's going to go up a lot forever. But these guys, they have miscalculated the economics of the system. If Bitcoin is an economic system that is designed to work in a specific way, and that specific way is not allowed to happen on the thing that calls itself Bitcoin, I think they're in for maybe one of the rudest awakenings that we've seen in finance in a long time. Now, Michael Saylor has already been the biggest loser in finance history about 25 years ago. He lost $14 billion in one day in 2001, got sued for it, had to pay like $15 million in fines and restitution because he overcalculated his brilliance once. And I think he's doing the exact same thing again. And this time he's dragging a bunch of other companies with him who are trying to cut their losses right now. We've seen almost all these other Bitcoin treasury-based companies take a major shit, frankly. David Bailey's Nakamoto company has lost 99.x% of its value in the last 6 months. And so I think that's going to be the story of it. Now, I don't think it's going to just die one day, but I think it's going to cease to be an interesting investment. Then therefore people are going to walk away from it. Hash power is going to come down. People are going to have to reassess all the things that they were told by all these influencers, all of your, Bitcoin Standard and all these guys with these Up Forever podcasts and stuff. Like, they're going to have a lot of answering to do about their economic nonsense and all the promises they've made. And it's just based on a false premise. Bitcoin is cash. Bitcoin is designed to pay for itself by people spending Bitcoins. And you can't spend them very well on BTC. It purposely throttled in order to try to engineer this other financial model, and they failed to engineer that financial model sufficiently. And so, Strategy's sitting, negative $7 billion on their books right now because they don't think Bitcoin is supposed to work like Bitcoin. And I think all these people are going to get a major slap on the wrist, and they're going to have to reassess. And I think all those people are going to say, what is Bitcoin for? We're over here still paying our bills, still just being humble, still just being Bitcoin. And I think that when Mark Zuckerberg starts looking at like, hey, where's all the meta traffic going? And it's all happening on BSV and bypassing Facebook and the open internet. People are going to say, well, how's that possible? And we say, well, because we're Bitcoin. And that's going to be a very funny conversation at some point.
Yeah. What do you think? The last question I have is some marketing for BSV. Like, I tell you, I wanted to put a BSV logo, and I find the Bitcoin logo, and I find one of like a dragon, and I'm like, what is this? We got a little work to do on the marketing front. What do you think about that a little bit?
So, I mean, it's funny because this actually happened in Bitcoin too. Back in the day, like, nobody owns Bitcoin, right? It's an open protocol. And people used to have a vertical upright B that was like yellow, and then it turned into the orange one that was crooked. And then, there's been a few versions of that logo that have floated around. And BSV kind of played with the same thing. Like, we weren't preparing to be a new blockchain in the first place. And so the dragon was actually the logo for the SV node software for Bitcoin Cash. Like we had a lot of Chinese miners, and Chinese love dragons, so we put a golden dragon on the node software to say, hey, come mine this with us, and a bunch of them did. But then when all of a sudden we turned into a separate blockchain, it's like, oh shoot, like now what? So by default, that dragon became the BSV logo for a little bit. And then there was an interim where people are like, okay, well, the dragon doesn't really work. Like, it doesn't read very well on a screen and all this other stuff. So people came up with like, let's revert back to that original Bitcoin logo, like a vertical B on a gold background. Like that's Bitcoin. And that's great. But then the BSV Association, which is a Swiss nonprofit, a bunch of people that were involved and said, look, we want to form a consortium that like manages the software and some of this other stuff. Like we'll be like, I don't know, like a third party separate from the things, but we'll maintain stuff in a way that's like very clear and legal. And then they created a logo for their organization that is just the letters BSV in a blue box. And, then some people are like, oh, that's the BSV logo because they're called the BSVA. And so I look at it and I'm like, okay, look, the BSV logo is the vertical B in a gold circle, period. That's BSV, Bitcoin SV, the blockchain. The BSVA logo is the blue box with the letters BSV in it. And then that dragon logo is the one for the node software. And the problem for us, I think, isn't so much like our marketing message. It's the fact that people don't know we exist, and we've been nixed for, like CoinDesk or Cointelegraph. Like, they're not writing articles about the stuff we're up to. So they're not helping us clarify these things. And in fact, if you look at what they write, they simply write about how we're liars or scammers or frauds or whatever else. And so all we get is negative press from all these people that are purposely trying to make it even more confusing. But that's my answer on the reason there's multiple logos floating around. It's generally like there's an answer, but it's just general ignorance in the economy about it.
Yeah. I think, so y'all are or I say y'all, but so purist, into Bitcoin, and like I said, it was a pleasure meeting Kate and Ty, and
they're great.
I wasn't able to get it edited in time, but what'd you say?
They're great. No, Kate, I've only known Kate for a few months. I've known Ty for a few years. Both good people. They're excited about it. Ty is one of the only other people who I respect from like a technical standpoint, who really sees it for what it is. And so he owns a software dev firm. It's self-funded. And he's like, look, man, I think we're going to win. Like I'm willing to go hungry for as long as it takes because I think this is going to be the thing that changes the world. And I respect the hell out of him for it.
Yeah, he was showing me all kinds of stuff on his that he was building, everything from games to just all different kinds of apps, and he was showing it to me. And I think if you even sign up for his stuff, and I'll have to figure this out for whenever I post their interview, but they even give you a little bit of BSV so that you can transact on chain and everything like that. Well, sir, we've had a lot of people join throughout. So for anyone that wasn't here for the beginning of the interview, let them know where can they find you. We're going to be posting this. Obviously, it's live. We're going to have it clipped up, and we're also going to clip the interview and post that on YouTube as a full dedicated video. So just let people know how to find you, and then if there's any last things you want to say about BSV that we did not cover, you're more than welcome.
Cool. Well, you can find me. I have my personal site is at kurtwuckertjr.com. I write articles. I stream, podcast, do a bunch of stuff. So that's my home base. You can find me on YouTube at Kurt Wuckert Jr. You can find me on X at Kurt Wuckert Jr. If you want to learn about developing on BSV, if you're a vibe coder, we've got beopen.ai. It's got all kinds of Claude skills and agent tools and all kinds of stuff. So if you want to develop on BSV, we make it real simple for you. If you want us to build your stuff, you can go to beopen.io and we would be happy to take your money and build your app for you. So if you have a business idea that you don't know how to implement, we're very happy to consult on it or consult your dev team. We can do as much or as little of the project as you're interested in. Or you can check us out at gorillapool.com, which is the mining pool where I'm a co-founder, and we're one of the most significant miners in the BSV space. And we're all in. We are fully committed to making BSV what Bitcoin was supposed to always be and do. And for anybody that wants to look into the story, like there is a lot of negative propaganda out there, but in reality, the people that are working on it are the only people in the blockchain space that have never tried to sell you a scam token. We've never had a big rug pull. We've never exited on anybody. In fact, everybody's been telling you that we're the scammers for about 8 years now. And we're all still here. We're still building apps. We're still trying to run businesses that are legitimate. We're getting funding from people that aren't related to Jeffrey Epstein. And we've rejected a whole lot of opportunities for that kind of nonsense. And so if you want just a real honest project that actually does what it says it can do and ultimately wants to change the world in all the ways that all the other projects pretend that they want, that's BSV.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir. I'll tell you what, I learned a lot, especially breaking down talking about when you make a transaction, it doesn't actually settle, and it doesn't have to settle for 99% of,
right,
daily things. And then I love getting into conspiracy theories and all of that.
Me too.
It's interesting. The last thing I'll say is, when I was going through the white paper, I realized that somebody from formal English, UK, British, wrote the white paper. You could tell there's some words that have dual spellings, in what I call American English or real English, and then from bad English over in Europe. But no, I'm just having fun. But Kurt, thank you very much, sir.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, guys, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. I hope y'all learned as much as I did. I learned a lot from him. I sure did. We had some other comments in there. Yeah. Thank y'all for attending and everything. We're gonna get clipped up and posted. Let's get back and what's up, y'all? What's up, man? Def Bull Trap. Well, let's take a look because the Qs are they're basically stagnant. Let's take a look at that real quick. The Qs, this is on the monthly. Let me go back to the daily. So this is that trend line we were looking at, and here's the 100-day moving average that we are still underneath that. And so we'll see how it is tomorrow. Let's go over here and take a look at crypto right here. Let's see, Caspa. Up there, 0.32. Let's go look at BTC. And guys, like I said, if y'all are looking for somewhere for a new exchange, Blofin is our stream sponsor. It's where I do all my trades. So any trades I take during the stream will be on Blofin and things like that. 73.6. One thing I'll do real quick is come up here and go to CoinGlass. And we're looking at liquidity levels. And so if you kind of see, we've taken out a lot of this liquidity up here. We've got liquidation liquidity down at like 71. Then under that, if we go back a month from when the drop really started, you can see a little more liquidity, 74, 75,000. That's really the highest I could see us going unless we're back. But obviously, we would have to flip the 50-week simple moving average for me to consider we're really back. But yeah, we got some more liquidity up a pretty good amount at 74.5. So I think that'd be a point where I wouldn't mind trying to take a little short. Let me mark that out. And we're almost there. But it's going to matter a lot to do with this. What happens with the Qs, what happens with this trend line. Like I said, this is on the short side of things. But if we see this ramp up, we'll probably see the rest of the market go down. Let's go take a look at X real quick. Israel BOM'd a CIA station in Saudi Arabia and is now blaming Iran. Wow. Wow, that sounds interesting, don't it, guys? Let's listen.
Struck the station.
Yes, sir. It was a lot of fun. Thank you. Let's listen to this. Nothing like a good old conspiracy theory after we were talking about Epstein and stuff. That was fun.
A Fox News alert, an official source has confirmed that a suspected Iranian drone has hit a CIA station in Saudi Arabia's capital. Jennifer Griffin is live in Washington. Jennifer, what do we know?
Well, Jessica, we've confirmed with an official source that, in fact, it was an Iranian drone that struck the station, the CIA station in Riyadh. It was part of that U.S. Embassy compound, part of that drone strike last night that led to damage at the embassy. This is certainly a symbolic victory for the IRGC. Nobody was injured. Nobody was at the embassy at the time. The Washington Post was the first to report on the incident, and that it was, in fact, the CIA station that was targeted and hit. But what this indicates is that drones, the Iranian drones, are going to be a big problem. They can take out the missile launchers and even the missile stockpiles, but they have thousands, if not tens of thousands of these drones, and anyone can put them in the back of a truck and fire them. These are really the new suicide bombs.
Have y'all seen that? Have y'all seen those? So I was seeing something, and it said that these drones cost about $50K or something like that. These Shahed drones, and they're like, you know, they don't come back. They go and they crash into a target, and that's it. But they're like $50K. Look, Iran sends drones. It costs $50K. America follows up. So our missiles are like $1 million, and the drones are $50K. And you could see this right here.
Drones, Shahed drones.
I don't really care too much about what he's saying, even though this is a really good video. But this is how they have them in these box trucks. So they have these mobile box trucks, and then they prop up and they can send those drones off. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Let's see if there's any oil prices. So oil topped at 78, and now it's just kind of sitting there. They're going to try to keep the price of oil down, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. Tangent does not offer BSV. No, they don't. No, it was hard. I think I went to Mexi, but yeah, it was just because they had it. And but yeah, it's definitely something that's been against. But yeah, I'm curious how the market's going to close soon. You know, I don't think we're just bright and green candles for the rest of the time. There's too much stuff going on in the markets, and this don't look the best. You know, it's not a bull flag, in my opinion. I mean, I guess you could try to say that's a bull flag, but it just don't look like it to me. It's too broad. It's lasted too long. It's like a rolling top. And then, you know, BTC, I think, I mean, I'm happy about it, but I just, I think that it's just a relief pump. We'll see how high it goes. Benjamin Cohen's really big into like dates and stuff, and he says that in March we normally get a pump in a bear market year, but there is incentives for the Republicans to try to end it because there is midterms. But you know, midterms are in November and people have such short minds. So I mean, as long as this thing's over by July or August or whatever, it should be fine. Spain official denies White House statement it agreed to cooperate. Yeah, Spanish government. I posted a clip about that. Super tankers back away from Gulf as Hormuz. Super tankers are diverting from the Persian Gulf as tensions around the strait escalate, with several vessels rerouting to the Atlantic. And like, think about those drones that they have, 50K. What if it just put one in the ocean once or twice a day, right there in the strait? People wouldn't go there. More than 60 empty tankers are idling or slowing, creating a massive block log. Let's see what else Walter said. He posts a lot of good stuff. I can't believe I'm not following him. US B-2 bomber set to deploy to UK base for Iran strikes. Expected to arrive at bases within days. Amazon cuts jobs. Yeah, I don't know. So personally, that's my strategy. I'm going to be looking for a short, but I don't know, 75, 80K now, maybe, you know. But remember, guys, I'm not a financial advisor. Whatever I'm doing does not mean you should be doing it. But I think I will. And if you do happen to be looking for a new exchange, you can join our stream sponsor down below, Blofin. As always, we're here Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 2 hours ago. So I appreciate everyone sharing the space, everyone being a part of it. I know it was a good conversation today. And if we also look, this is the 1 hour. If we go to the 4 hour right here, remember, guys, I say you don't have to make technical analysis so hard. Like, we're pretty high on the RSI. Could we go higher? Sure. But we're pretty high on the RSI. If we go here, we're about as high as it could go. So, yeah, I think I'm going to open something up here. It hit 74. Yeah, took out a lot of the liquidity as we've seen right here. There's a little bit left at, what is that, 74.5? Let me, because did we, yeah, now there doesn't show that much, so that was a little old. So it looks like all the liquidity is to the downside. So, yeah, I'm gonna set that up. But yeah, guys, like I said, link down below if y'all want it, and I'll put a QR code up there if anybody's interested. But I do want to thank them for being a stream sponsor. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do this, and so it means a lot to me. I haven't had any problems out of them. I love trading on there and using it and stuff. It's a good exchange and things like that. But so far, just to do a little recap, we've seen BTC break out. But what we have not seen last we looked at it was any of these breakout. Okay, so now it's looking, since we did that interview, ETH does look like it's trying to break out. Let's go look at Tau. Tau still holding in the channel. And let's look at Cash real quick. And Cash looks like it's tried to break out. But even those altcoins that have broke out, they still have not made it up to the high that we got after the big drop. Whereas if we look at BTC, BTC has overextended. Like it was a, what, 70, really the high was right here, 72.25. And it's up here right now. 74. So, you know, how much higher is it going to go? But guys, we will be back tomorrow. I appreciate everyone. Make sure you follow Kurt. As you can see, he's a very good man. He's very knowledgeable, and we will see you tomorrow. I love you all.